Hey all, welcome to Share Trek. This is Raj here. Today I want to talk to you about the recent economic issues that we have been generally speculating in this channel, basically about inflation, how it happened and when it's going to go down. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I've been thinking about these concepts for almost 3 weeks now, and I'm not any wiser. I've had a head spinning fundamental 180-degree change in my understanding of what caused the current inflation, courtesy to watching an interview of Steve Hanke, professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins Institute. I would really like to hear from you guys what you think about the theories in the comments. I've also put a link to the interview of Steve Hanke by Jon Stewart. It's in his podcast called as The Problem with Jon Stewart. It comes in Apple TV. So I put a link to the interview in the description. If you go there, there's a link to the actual Apple TV complete interview. If you have Apple TV, then you can have a look at it, come back and let me know what you think. I'd really like to hear from you, your theories in the comments. However, before we proceed, please oblige me by entering your name for the acrylic on canvas raffle by clicking the link in the description below. I'll paint, pack and ship it at my cost to the winner, who will be picked up by me on a live stream as soon as we cross 2,000 subscribers. There's a lot of energy on the channel right now, and we are growing very fast. We have crossed 1,735 subscribers now, and 2,000 is not too far off. So I better go and finish this episode quickly and start painting the canvas and get it ready to be shipped across. So with that said, let's get started. Welcome back, friends. Unlike my regular show, I'll be glancing at my notes here sometimes because the theories I'm going to discuss are a bit disorienting to me. I'm still trying to digest them and reorganize my understanding of economics in a way that feels comfortable and familiar, but it is getting down hard because the concepts are very, very different. First, I'll explain the current narrative that I have for inflation, and that's what I have been talking about in this channel. After I do that, for basis, then we'll talk about what Professor Steve Hanke told Jon Stewart about inflation. So I would strongly recommend that you watch his podcast in case you're very interested in economics. As I said, I've left a link in the description below. Now let us look at my current understanding of our situation based on which I do my fundamental analysis and my hypothesis. I believe that when we had the pandemic, people were asked to stop production and they were paid to stay at home due to the lockdown. They did not produce but got purchasing power. The goods that were not produced were now being chased by this money which was given to them. On top of that, we have supply chain issues that prevented new supply, chip shortage, and higher oil prices due to the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and also higher wheat prices due to Russia and Ukraine being the breadbasket of Europe and producing the bulk of wheat production. I've always maintained that the high oil price creeps into everything because power supply is generated through oil in many places. So that feeds into the electricity bill and it will go into the cost of every factory. We use gas to transport material from the farm to the restaurant to the factory and everywhere. People use cars to drive to work. So inflation percolates into every area if oil price goes up. That's my understanding. Then we sharpened our definition further and said that at present the supply chain issues have abated and the goods inflation is cooling down, whereas the service inflation is continuing to go up. And last week we got our first indication that the services sector wage inflation has calmed down, which means that service inflation is also going to come down. I believe that the Fed now needs to carefully reduce the money supply by quantitative tightening by reducing the mortgage-backed security renewals and selling bonds. I always said that I prefer slower interest rate hikes and faster tightening on the by selling bonds and mopping up the funds and going a bit slow on the MBS because the housing sector could face crisis if the MBS was tightened too quickly. So this is my current understanding. This is my logic around the world, and it sits very well with me, and I'm very familiar with this. But now, let us hear what Professor Steve Hanke has to say, and that changes my understanding a big deal. I see a lot of logic in what Professor Hanke is saying, and I'm trying very hard to incorporate that into my current frame of reference, but it's not sitting gracefully into it. Professor Hanke categorically refused to accept that high oil price caused inflation, and he gave a very good example. He says in 1973 there was an Arab oil embargo. Actually, this oil embargo was caused due to US support to Israel during the Arab-Israeli war, and at that time oil prices went up, and the Bank of Japan decided to increase money supply with the aim to ease the impact of higher oil prices on its people. However, this led to higher currency in circulation and cost inflation. Then, in 1978, a drop in oil production led to an increase in oil prices. It's also referred to as the oil shock of 1978 to 1979. During this period, Bank of Japan used the lesson that it learned from the previous 1973 situation, and they took a different approach. They did not increase the money supply, and as a result, they did not face any increase in inflation, despite the fact that oil prices had gone up. As per Professor Hanke, if oil prices go up, people will spend more on oil and less on something else, and overall the spending will get balanced. He further says that everything depends on amount of money supply, and that a 5% steady money supply growth can help keep inflation stable at 2%. I think we need inflation to grow the economy, but 2% is manageable, whereas anything more than 2 can cause systemic issues and cause imbalance in the system more than we can handle and get us into circumstances like what we are in right now. He also says that the data supports the concept that 2 consecutive years of inflation at 4% or more is always preceded by sustained increase in money supply. Here is the other theory that I am trying to digest. If the government imposes quarantine and shuts down, it has to pay people. There is no way of going around that. However, the paying of the people is going to cause a deficit for the government. And as for Professor Henke, the government should pay for this deficit by getting the treasury to sell bonds to the public. And when this is done, people will not have so much extra money as they have right now, because they would have put that extra money, some of that, into the bonds, and it will prevent the inflation from going runaway and rampant as it is right now, because people will have started to hunker down and spend less because they have put some of that money into the bonds. However, I think this alone is not the solution, because this approach will only delay the problems until the bonds mature. Now, let me take you to an experience that I have personally lived through. This takes me to the situation I saw in Ireland while I was living and working in Dublin in the early 2000s. I think it was in 2004. There was tremendous prosperity and jobs creation due to the Celtic Tiger. In order to curb the purchasing power, the government came up with a plan called a small savings incentive account. I think the maximum contribution per person into the SSIA account was 254 euros per month per person. And the government would contribute equal to whatever a person contributed. So if anyone maxed out 254 euros, the government would put 254 euros from its side into that account. So the person will be reached by 508 euros per month. And the catch was that you cannot withdraw from the SSIA account until the end of 5 years. So what happened was, at the end of 5 years, when all these SSIA started to mature, there was a spurt in inflation in the Irish economy. So what I'm thinking is that the solution lies not only in getting people to put money back into the bonds to control the inflation, but also to get the bonds paid back in a staggered manner. So there has to be some kind of way in which the maturing bonds are released in a staggered fashion, so that there isn't a sudden spurt of inflation that was delayed in the past, but which rears up its head 5 years down the line. So, well, things are as clear as mud to me, and I think you are also as confused after hearing this episode. I need to think through these two theories and decide what I should believe in. And what do you guys think? Please take a look at the episode of The Problem with Jon Stewart, the Steve Hanke episode, and drop your comments below. That's all from me for now. I'll catch up with you again later. You guys have a great weekend. Bye for now.